So today we have Scarlett speaking from Debt for Climate. So when I asked Scarlett about a short bio, I was very happy to read a couple of sentences that are very nice. She's an activist, full-time activist from 2019. But alongside with being a climate activist, what I liked about her bio is that she claims that her work is focused on unifying the voice of the people and bringing everyone together to create a better, more equitable future. I like this very much about this bio because now we are all working and all seeing that the climate crisis is also a social crisis, it's also a political crisis, and these being able to see the entire ensemble is something that I really appreciated, and I'm really interested. So Scarlett will talk about Debt for Climate, the initiatives, and I welcome her. I thank you all the participants, and Scarlett, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for making time to come and have this talk about Debt for Climate and why it's so important to cancel the debt of the countries in the global south, also known as most affected people and areas. And thank you so much for the interpreters. I know that you are doing a fantastic job. I hope I'm not gonna give you too many troubles. I'm a bit dyslexic and also have pronunciation issues. So thank you so much for doing this. So yeah, I'm Scarlett. I'm originally from Romania, but I live in France since 2020. I was kind of forced to leave the country, but that's a story for another time. And I am part of the campaign Debt for Climate since the beginning, together with Sunny from South Africa. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the debt, what is the debt, and then we're gonna connect debt with the climate, and I'm gonna try to explain that link and why it's super important to cancel the debt in order to be able for the countries in the global south to take climate action. So debt, as you may or may not know, it's a concept. It doesn't really exist, right? Like when you go to the bank to loan some money, the bank creates those money and it gives you those fictive money with interest, and then you'll have to pay it back with the interest. And same goes for the countries. And the difference between the different kinds of debts that the countries have is the countries in the global south, in MAPA, are mostly in debt in a foreign currency, which means the pressure and the impact of the debt is way much higher than for a country that is borrowing money in their own currency. Also, the systems to the infrastructure to give those loans in a different currency and the obligations that are coming with that foreign currency, it's different, and it's much more impactful and puts much more pressure on these countries. And because of all of this debt and debt trap diplomacy, we come up and we started Debt for Climate campaign, which is a campaign that was initiated by activists in the global south, in countries that have huge debts and no way of paying back these debts. And on top of that are the countries that are facing the climate crisis now, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, when the United Nations, the COP, all the meetings, all these conversations plan to go zero emissions and to cut the emissions and start the fossil fuels. That's too late for these countries. They are facing the climate crisis now. So what's the link between debt and the climate crisis, and what's the link between debt and the climate action that needs to be taken? So the thing is that, you see, we have trillions of dollars as resources in the ground, and we have trillions of dollars in debt. And those resources that are being exploited in the global south, in MAPA countries, and are exploited by the companies of these countries that form the IFM and the World Bank. And those countries are saying that we are going green, like we only have or we only produce green energy. Okay, good for you. But how many companies you have in countries in the MAPA that are still exploiting fossil fuels and selling it not to your country because you are a green country, right? Like you are producing and you are using that much percent of green energy, but they are selling those fossil fuels and those resources that they are extracting to countries that don't have like that much green percentage, or are not interested, or are like they don't have the money to do the investment necessary to have these green technologies. So what if we cancel the debt, those trillions of dollars that exist, we use those trillions of dollars to do the just transition, the sustainable transition in MAPA countries, and we keep the fossil fuels in the ground? Because once we have the technology to produce green energy and to be like sustainable, then we don't need to extract more fossil fuels. So this is the main goal of the campaign. We are now in the phase of mobilizing the people and create this movement that has the power to actually achieve this goal, because this is a huge fight. It's a huge demand, and we're gonna need as many millions, billions, if not, on the streets to be able to achieve this demand. And the beauty of the campaign is the fact that for many years, I've been mostly climate activist most of the part, but that's because I understand that the social justice, it's equal to climate justice. You cannot have climate justice without social justice. You cannot take climate action in a country that doesn't have a democracy, or that doesn't have the resources, or like in a country that everyday struggle of big percent of the population is to have food on the table, asking them to think about like taking climate action and things that like technologies and investment is just too much to ask. Also, if there's no social justice, if the people are not involved in the decisions that are made, then the governments are the ones that are benefiting from different grants and different funds that the European Union or other institutions are giving for the just transition. But there's like another a big point of my talk today, how this debt it's connected with the fact that these countries are not taking actions now. Well, when you have a country that has the debt represents 57% of their GDP, those money go to pay the debt. Those money are money that are not used for education, for health system, for just transition, for new technologies. Those are money that are going to the IFM, to the World Bank, to private investors. And in behalf of this trap diplomacy, in behalf of this debt that the country owns, there's another thing that happens, and that's the rich countries, and I like to call them big boys, are blackmailing these countries, the developing and undeveloped countries, to accept extractivist projects, more projects to extract, to deforest, to just do more harm to the environment. And a clear example that I can share with you is the case of Romania. We have now a big project. They want to open a platform to extract gas from Black Sea. You have an ore that it's happening in the Black Sea, and the project, it's going on. It's not canceled, it's not postponed. They want to launch it in 5 years. And the company that has this project, it's 53% foreign company, and 47% it's belonging, the shares belong to the state. So how is going to the Romanian state, how is going to accept to do the just transition and to stop fossil fuels when they own 47% of the shares of the company that it's like doing the whole extractivism in Romania? Um, and this is happening in many other countries, and I invite you, all of you, to go and talk with activists in the countries that are interesting you. I invite you to go and search. There's a lot of information online. We also have an amazing research team that is doing a lot of research, so if you have any other questions, please reach out to us. You can find our email address on our website, debtforclimate.org, and we can provide more information on this to you. And then what else I wanted to share? I'm gonna share some numbers with you. You don't have to remember, but are these numbers that, you know, just makes you think and makes you like open your eyes. So in 2020 alone, the global South countries spent 372 billion servicing the debt. 73 of the IFM's 85 pandemic support loans were conditional on public service cuts. And you see, like, when these loans are given, the IFM, the World Bank, the creditors are implementing different structural adjustment, and this is only impacting the people. So, like, for example, the number of people living with less than $5 a day increased by over 1 billion during the structure adjustment period. Latin America urban poverty rose from 50% in 1986, and Nigeria's poverty rate rose from 28 to 66% in the same period of the same period of time, 1980-1986. And these in-debt countries are at the mercy of these multinational predators who want to push for more export. And there are some clear examples that you can find on Google search. Senegal was pressured by the World Bank to open up for more oil and gas extraction by Australian, US, and British companies. The IFM pushed Argentina to allow European and US companies to frack in Vaca Muerta, despite fierce opposition from the local and indigenous communities. The IFM put forward coal and gas extractions as a solution to Mozambique debt crisis and climate disasters. So John Adams said that there are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword, and the other one is by debt. I hope I kind of introduce you and give you a little bit of perspective of the campaign. We had our first mobilization on the street during G7 summit. We had actions in around 23 countries. We have, my guess, more than 10,000 people on the street. So as you can see, we need more people on the street, and we are working on this. And the next call to action is going to be in October, and we are launching the call to action from the 10th October, but mostly we're gonna have the actions concentrated on some particular dates that have a big significance for the campaign. So the first date, it's 12th October. This is the day in which the indigenous communities are celebrating their resistance, because on the 12th October, Christopher Columbus found the new continent that called India. And at the very beginning, this was a day in which that that event, the discovering of the Americas was celebrated, but then the indigenous communities shift the purpose of the event, and they are celebrating their resistance, their diversity, and their union, and the resistance in so long time, years of colonialism. And then second date that also has a huge weight and a huge importance for us is 15 October is the anniversary of Thomas Sankara, who was he's just such an inspiration. He was talking and demanding the cancellation of debt, and only a few days after he was assassinated. And then the whole period 10-16 October, the IFM and the World Bank have their annual meeting that is going to happen in Washington, D.C. And since our demand is cancel the debt, they are the main target. But then probably there are going to be groups that are going to take actions around COP27 and COP15, the biodiversity COP. And there the target and the demand, it's different because the target is not IFM, the target is the UN and the presidents and the leaders that are making decisions there. And the demand is to put ecological debt, economical debt, and colonialism on the agenda of these events. And this is also important because in 2019, I participated at COP, and I saw what a joke it is. I saw how they treated the indigenous communities. They are not allowed to have a space in the main event in the blue zone. They had some side events on the green zone. And when we had we demanded to have a small performance on the blue zone with the indigenous leaders, we were denied. We still did that performance, and then we were kicked out, and we were banned from coming back in the following days. It was just the first week of COP. So all the NGOs were having discussions until 5 in the morning to see if we can go back. And we were around 20,000 observers in that point. And just because we try to distort business as usual, they tried to ban all of us. And of course that didn't happen. It was a huge scandal. The press was there, and eventually they let us go back. But it's important because this is a troublesome truth, right? When you ask these leaders and these rich countries about the colonialism and about the historical debt that they have to pay to the countries, they don't want to have that conversation. They will try to shut you down. They will try to ignore you. They will try to hide you. And that's why it's also important if you and your groups are going to make actions around those dates to put and to ask this demand or even center if you can, if that's an option for you. And I think this is kind of all. It's shorter than I expected. I don't know if this is okay, but we have more time for questions. And we have Sunny from South Africa here. He's a wonderful speaker. I think it's fine if he shares, if he has something else to add. I'll be really happy to have him inspire you, because he's always inspiring me.
Thank you very much, Scarlett, for the nice speech. I think it's perfectly okay to have more time for discussions and debate. And yeah, for sure, Sunny I invite Sunny if you want to add something to speak about something. You are welcome.
Thank you. Scarlett, you did very well. You covered everything, nothing left out. I perhaps would just emphasize, because sometimes the question is, why are we targeting the global north? Why is there this fundamental call for the global north to cancel the debts of the global south, the financial debts of the global south? Well, it goes back to colonialism, slavery, and extractivism. I'll give you the example of Pakistan, that is responsible for less than 0.4% of global emissions, but 30% of the country is now underwater. So obviously the rain and the floods are partly part of the annual monsoon, but here there was unbelievable glacial melting, which exacerbated the flooding. The flooding now covers 30% of the country. So here's a country colonized by the British, responsible for less than 0.4% of global emissions and suffering devastation. More time spent on, with the greatest of respect, covering the Queen's funeral than the country that is 30% underwater. Completely devastating. So colonialism plays a role. Extractivism plays a role, and slavery plays a role. So, because of these three, I'm going to call them global sins. What has happened is the global north has created a debt, a moral, legal debt owed to the global south for these pivotal three sins, global sins, and it's time to pay up. We ask this question, who actually owes whom the money? So the global north owes the global south, and it's time to pay up. And we cannot let them off the hook simply because it's a modern society, we've moved on. You know, some people tell us, well, just move on. I am a member, I am a citizen of the global south, South Africa, where we struggle, where we will struggle, double the global impact of global warming. So here we are asking the global north. In fact, we say this because it's global south led this campaign. We are not asking, we're demanding that the global north pays up. And what will we do? We don't have to extract the gold, the oil, the gas, the chrome, the lithium, all of that. We won't have to devastate our ecology, our economies, pay poor wages, subject ourselves to structural adjustment programs imposed by the World Bank and the IMF, because we can keep the fossil fuels in the ground if we do not have to pay. So let's give you some stats. Scarlett gave you some very large numbers. Jason Hickel, the London School of Economics professor, and a group of other researchers in February of this year, so quite contemporary, in February of this year, published an article, a research paper on extraction of value from the global south to the global north. And the period under discussion or research is 1990 to 2015. It was 242 trillion US dollars. Now that number, I'm glad we're in the room of a lot of scientists and academics and professionals, so maybe the number makes more sense to you. But to me, a mere citizen from the southern tip of Africa, the number is mind-boggling. 242 trillion US dollars. So let's say that's too big of a number to digest. Let's just take 2015. Remember, it's a 25-year study from 1990 to 2015. 2015 alone was 11.9 trillion US dollars. Still a large number to wrap your head around. But let's put it in context. Somebody asked, what's the definition of global poverty? So global poverty, according to the World Bank and the UN, in some of the reports, say people who survive on less than $1.90 a day, global poverty. That 11.8 or 11.9 trillion dollars can wipe out global poverty today as it stands 72 times over. 72 times over. All of that money extracted from the global south to the global north to pay for the electric cars, to pay for all the fancy stuff. So there's a demand from the global south to pay what is due. Even if they cancel the global south, global north, if the global north puts pressure on the IMF and the World Bank, BlackRock, and all of these other lenders to cancel all of the debt, it still will only be a small down payment of the total amount they owe the global south. So that is the demand why we are targeting the global north to pay its fair share. So that's one of the issues. But the lived experiences of people on the ground tell an absolutely different story, right? We can't talk to them about 1.5. We can't talk to them about rapid transition to renewable energy. We must talk to them at their point of need. we must say to the global south, the people in the global south, you will get better healthcare. Your children will get a better education. In South Africa, foreign debt is over 60%, over 54% of GDP. Unemployment rate, one of the highest in the world, at 62% for people in the age group of 18 to 24. General unemployment, 34%, and we have what we call the expanded definition at 43%. Now, all of these things are very, very, very real, right? So we need to be able to say to people, you'll get better employment, you'll get better jobs, you'll transition, because 90% of our energy in South Africa and in some Southern African countries come from burning coal. We suffer from what economists call the resource curse. We have too much of this resource. We can burn coal at the current rate in South Africa that we currently burn it. We can burn it for another 250 years. That's how much we have it. But it doesn't mean that we need to take it out. What is the chant at all of our calls? Keep the coal in the hole and the oil in the soil. That's what we want to do in South Africa, in Southern Africa, in the global South. So this call, it's a demand we make. But why are we talking to global North people and activists? Because we are in solidarity with each other. You have privilege in your country. I always talk about this when I'm asked to speak. You have privilege. What privilege do you have? First of all, you have the obvious privilege in most cases of the privilege of whiteness. But you have the privilege of proximity to power. You have the privilege of access to economic resources like money and transport and free the tube and the underground. We don't have that. You have unlimited data, access to unlimited data. You can go to the World Bank office and stick yourself onto the door with some cable ties or some super glue. If people in the global South do that, they come from repressive regimes, they'll call the police and they'll cut your arm off. Now, I say this because we know activists who have gone in London and the UK, and what they've done is they protest and they get a nice fine from the police and say, please see us in 3 weeks' time when you come to court. In South Africa, if I go to jail, I will get lost in the system. And as an extreme thing, I will be raped inside the prison before I can go and plead my climate case. So this is the reality why we are saying to the global North, use your privilege effectively, use it as a weapon. And we want to act in solidarity with you, but also recognize that your lived experience is different to my lived experience. Scarlett said this, right? So we say in the global North, they talk about the end of the world. In the global South, we talk about the end of the month. And in some countries, we talk about the end of the day. Where is my food coming from for tonight? So I want to leave you with that extreme view that we're in this together, but on different levels. Some people are in this in yachts, some are on boats, and some are fighting for their life in water that is up to their necks. So I want to say that this call is a real call. And why do we think it's so innovative? Because it really is something we can deliver. We can morally seize this moment, because there's a moment coalescing on the earth, on the whole planet, in this whole world. We can see the real effects of the climate disaster. We can see the real impacts. We have the youth who are energizing us around the world, no longer prepared to take the status quo. And there's activists like you and me and scientists who are saying business as usual is going to lead to a zero-sum game. So I leave you with those kind of things to think about this campaign and why it's so innovative and why we need you to back it wherever you are. Now remember Thomas Sankara, right? Okay, Thomas Sankara, revolutionary leader from Burkina Faso, right? Who spoke about the impact of structural adjustments programs on the World Bank and the IMF, amongst a lot of other things. Also spoke about debt cancellation and was assassinated less than a week after making that phenomenal speech on the 15th of October in 1987. This year we celebrate 35 years. We don't celebrate, we commemorate this revolutionary leader. If you're thinking about what action you can do in your area, the best thing you can do is search us out and see which place in the world you are located in, and there's probably an action. But even if one person stands outside the World Bank office or outside a multinational or BlackRock or the IMF or any bank that's supporting international funding or a fossil fuel company, that will be good enough. Join us on this trip. Join us on this journey. It's a multi-year campaign. We don't expect to end it by Christmas, but it's an ongoing thing. But we need the campaign to be viral. We need it to be on everybody's lips. We need people to say, this is the most fundamental thing we can do to fight the climate crisis, cancel the debt of the global south. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Sunny, and thank you, Scarlett, for your powerful words. I open now the discussion, the questions. If there is anyone who wants to raise their hand, they can ask the question directly, or you can write in the chat. Sunny, I think you are already answering to, you have a question in the chat about a study you mentioned, about a reference, but maybe it's a very short question. So yes, the questions are open. While we wait for people writing or raising their hands, I don't see right now. Okay. Yeah, I can ask a question to you, Scarlett, about something that you mentioned that was yeah, I was struck by this company that is owned at 43 or 48% by the by the Romanian government, extracting fossil fuels in the Black Sea. And so my question is, alongside debt cancellation, so after this economic pressure is released, I would maybe naively imagine that having a nationalized company is better in terms that you can stop thinking about money and profit and start as a government thinking about the climate. And so say, yes, even if it's not economically sustainable, I shut down my company because I can, because it's not anyone else, it's my company. So I would, I was curious about this. What would you think as an activist and as a person who is informed about this?
Well, Romanian government was one of the governments that supported at the European Union level the idea that the gas is a green resource. And that's because on our plan for adaptation and mitigation, I think is the translation, they consider gas as a green resource to do the just transition, to do the sustainable transition. And that because there's a lot of pressure on them from the other shareholders that are foreigners, but it's also because of the corruption. Romania, it's dealing a lot with corruption. It's at such a level that it's everywhere. And it's not in small quantities, it's in big quantities. One of our politicians that was prime minister, it's been 3-4 years by now. He went to prison after 2 convictions, keeping his job as the prime minister of the country, or the I don't know the term, but like the head of the Senate or the Parliament, one of them, I think it was the Senate, because the guy stole so much money from European funds that he owned a whole beach in Brazil. All the hotels, all the houses belong to him, like as a private person. And he didn't return the money. He just went for 3.5 years to prison, and now he's coming out and he's a rich guy. But those money that he stole are money that the citizens have to pay back. So of course the state doesn't want to, for them is like a source of money that they can just have and steal from the public money. And then the answer, you may think that, okay, but like in some point, just a little bit, they have to think about the citizens. No, they not. They just announced because now the gas, petrol and the gas, like the cars, the combustible price grows so much. They just announced that they're gonna put only 25% of the capacity, so they are not just gonna fill the pumps, which, like, of course, for me is like, yes, less fossil fuels that are burned, but in the same time they don't have the like the contagious plan to help the citizens, because the citizens are using that petrol to go to work, to do their jobs, to get the kids to school. So you cannot take a decision like this that will bring all the country in the verge of collapsing without having a plan to help that. More public transportation, make the public transportation free as Spain. You know, this is not happening in Romania. And all these plans, adaptation, sustainability, and I think like many other countries that are considered developing countries, and from the Eastern Europe, I can tell you that that's the perspective of all the countries in the Eastern Europe. Our governments are not thinking for us, the citizens. And there's nothing, I mean, yes, we have to mobilize, like going on the streets is the last resort, because the government, as long as they came and they say yes, it's a green resource, and we're gonna make a project in the Black Sea, and then they allowed companies to come to deforestation. It's another big problem that Romania has. We have like at this moment we have forest only on 26 of the surface of the country, and we have 47% of the country already in process of desertification. It's not in danger of being desertificated. It's already desertificating. It's the whole south of the country where it has a big population number, like the concentration of population, it's there, and also in the north west of the country, where again you have a big population concentration, and are the areas that are the plains where we grow our crops and where we grow our food. And the best idea that the government came with, let's plant 1 million trees. Like that's enough for such a big surface. So yeah, being a 47% state company, it's not helping much, as long as it's the debt trap diplomacy, as long as it's the corruption, this will not do any good.
Thank you, Scarlett. There are questions popping out in the chat. One is about the speech that yesterday the president of Colombia gave at the United Nations about, and the question is, how can we increase the pressure over this kind of governments that has established the debt cancellation in their agenda? Probably, I think we're talking about how can we support global South governments asking for it. And I also see on the other side, and I think it is also interesting to wonder, how do we battle against these kind of governments like Romania or Peru? They wrote in the chat where they want to keep on extracting, because they also, there is corruption, there is private money, and they also want to keep exploiting their own country because of becoming rich. So these are popping out, and so Jordan and Adam, if you want to add something to the question, please feel free to speak. Otherwise, I see Sunny also raised his hand.
Thank you. I'll answer the question about how do you support global South countries when we face this idea of corruption. So in South Africa also, a sitting president of the country was caught on corruption and went through a process. We had a public forum, commission of inquiry. He was found guilty or accused multiply. There's lots of evidence. Yet in that country of corruption, we managed to send Shell, the exploration company, packing, not once, but twice. They use their influence in government and political partners, very well-connected people, even people who originally started as the leading lights of the union movement, workers' union movement, who got corrupted by the greed and got corrupted or influenced by the extreme, insane and sinister wealth. They applied for exploration licenses around the coast at the same time that Shell was exploring for gas around the coast of Argentina. We took Shell to court and we won the case. We won the case because it was a coalition of environmental, climate, and indigenous peoples that organized themselves in a way, and obviously, you know, the term is called lawfare, right? Using legal terms to fight these battles in the courts. So that's how you can support it, is you can bring in your countries, you can launch criminal cases at the Hague, at the International Criminal Court, wherever it is, to be able to hold these corporations accountable. And then they were given a grace period and they came back to court better prepared, hoping to win the case again. And this time, the case was completely thrown out. They lost the case on multiple grounds. They will now have to go and talk to indigenous people. They also lost in South America. And just today, exploration companies lost their case in Australia and New Zealand, where those communities organized themselves to hold those multinational corporations accountable. So this is good news for our efforts, so that in your own countries, wherever you are, you can support those kind of organizations. You know, if you're from Norway, then Equinor is drilling, like reinforce what Scarlett said, very, very green in Scandinavia. And they say no fracking in Norway and Denmark and wherever, but it's okay to frack in South Africa. It's okay to frack in Australia or India, and it's okay to frack in South America. So hold them accountable. Go to Repsol's offices in Spain. Go to Total's offices in Paris. Go to ENI's offices in Italy and protest and hold them accountable. And because you have proximity to those leaders, hold those leaders accountable, just like the Debt for Climate representative in Germany, Louise Wagner, had an opportunity to speak to the finance minister and spoke to the finance minister. And the finance minister very flippantly made a comment that he'll take this call seriously. So we must be able to do that, because this is the fight. The fight must be fought in the courts, on the streets, in the water, in the boardroom, in the university, and in the classroom. And obviously in the labs around the world, because there's lots of scientists here. Thank you.
If that's okay, I want to add something to what Sani said. Excellent question, Jordan. And I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that we are now building a movement, and we are asking for the cancellation of the debt and use those money to do the sustainable transition. But because the movement, the campaign, it's so big and so diverse, this implementation of the demand is going to look different in different countries. And that's why we are coming together and we are unifying all the voices, climate activists, social justice activists, labor unions, everyone is welcome to join. So we can create together this global network of people that are supporting each other. So we can support each location, each country in particular, to implement this demand in a way that it's benefic and healthy for the people, not for the government, not for the corrupted system, not for the toxic systems that are implemented in the respective countries. So one big part of the work will be, once we achieve this demand, will be the role of the citizens in the decisions that are going to be made. And this is something that in the current system that we have, the citizens don't have that much to say when it comes to approve a project or when it comes to start, I don't know, something new in the country. But with the implementation of this demand, once we achieve to gain the fight, then the citizens will going to have a huge role in to implement this demand and make sure that the transition is the way they want to have it and the way that it's benefic for them. So that's why it's important to stand together and to fight together, and it's just the beginning, the fight. Once we achieve the demand, the work, everything, it has to be supported. And that's why, like, we are many, that's why I'm like, in the past years in my work, I always try to unify all the fights and unify all the struggles. And this campaign, I think, is that campaign that can unify all the voices, because once again, you cannot have climate justice without social justice. All the fights at the end of the day try to change a little part of the system that affects them. So if we put together all the fights, then we have a little part and a little part and a little part, and that makes a bigger part of the system that we want to change.
Thank you so much for answering the question. I'm going to take over from Daniele for a while there, as his Zoom is not responding. I was sadly away for a little bit, so if you could remind me of who was the last person to ask a question, and then we can move on to the following one.
I think we have a question from Anda. That says, how can we tackle universal basic income and wealth redistribution? Do you think people would be ready to fight for this? I am ready to fight for that, but I am not all the people. I will say that this universal basic income can be a part of the transition that is going to be made once we achieve the demand. It can be, and I don't know personally if, like, the whole world at global level it's ready to come together to this, but in the campaign we do have some people that are working or like fighting for this at global level, and I think Sunny may have a better answer than me.
So in South Africa, one of the strategies that we have, and if you go to our website, debt4climate.org, you'll see a video of me talking about this. So in South Africa, we link the issue of the cancellation of the debt to the provision of paying a universal income grant. So in South Africa, we spend about, in local currency, 192 billion rand. It's just over 10, maybe 12 billion US dollars in interest payments on a yearly basis. So, and we constantly get, because we recognize the intersectionality of all of the struggles. So the workers struggle for a universal or a living wage, or the unemployed for a basic income grant. That call resonates with us. So when we talk about the cancellation of the debt, we always get this response, but how are we going to afford it? You know, from the government and from corporate South Africa, how will we be able to pay for it? Well, we will be able to pay for it very, very comfortably if we cancel the debt, because the savings on the interest payments will be able to, amongst other things, fund the payment of a basic income grant. In South Africa, a basic income grant would be less than $95 a month, less than $95 a month. So it's insignificant. I don't know American power purchase parity, but the dollar in South Africa to the rand value is 17 to 1. So 17 local rands, 1,500 equates to about 85 to 90 US dollars. So that's how small the income grant can be in South Africa. Obviously, we think it needs to be like $200, but at least the beginning entry level is about 85 US dollars, and we can certainly be able to fund that from the cancellation of the debt. And then the call for a universal income grant is not just a South African call, but it's a universal call. I'm part of movements in Canada, in the United States, Scandinavia, Australia, where this issue of a basic income grant is not just a discussion for the extreme left or left intellectuals. It's becoming a study of working class people the world over, that they, in a world, in a society that is as rich as our society is today, we can pay the most vulnerable a livable stipend. And I think that we must all support that call for the payment of a universal income grant across the board in every country. Wherever a person needs it, they should be entitled to it. And it's not pie in the sky anymore. In the 80s, it was revolutionary. In the 2020s, it should be a necessity.
Thank you everyone for the questions. Sorry, I had some problem with Zoom. So thank you, Teresa, for jumping in. So I think there is a very interesting question by Jan in the chat. And since we are going towards the conclusion of this part, I really think it's very interesting to open also some ideas. So Jan, do you want to say this? Because or can you paste it again in the chat? Because I don't have it in the chat.
Yes, so my understanding is that debt for climate does not demand a conditionality on the debt. So I can see the reasons for that, but I think there is a big risk that if we go to say Bolsonaro and we say the debt of Brazil is cancelled, then there is no guarantee whatsoever that he will, for instance, stop deforesting the Amazon forest. So I think that these proposals will really have a much stronger support from people in the global north if there is some pressure and if there is some public commitment on leaders that so far have clearly ignored any concern for the environment, if we attach some conditionality to that cancellation. I'm absolutely in favor of that cancellation, but I don't trust leaders who have blatantly ignored the environment so far to just act, to just change their mind after this action that might happen. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I see both Scarlett and Sunny, so I will give you both because I think it's a very heated discussion also in that climate, something that you spoke about. So I will give you both the words. I will ask you to stay between the next 10 minutes altogether. But thank you. Feel free to also go beyond because I think it's very heated argument. So Scarlett, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll be brief so Sunny has more time. I agree with you, Jayan. I don't trust the governments neither. Like I'm coming from a very, very, very corrupt countries. That's why I mentioned that it's important to have this network of people, citizens that are going to supervise this project. Maybe we can be more clear and more like, yeah, just have this this clarity provided when we explain the campaign. I agree with you. Maybe this is not clear. And also in this phase, we are in the phase of building up the movement. We are way, way far, in my personal opinion, of achieving our demand. And now the focus of the very few people that are like full-time trying to set up and make this campaign going is to mobilize people and to create these regional coalitions of movements or like local coalition of movements that can be together to have the campaign branch in the region. And then all together globally, we are going to support each other and put pressure so that transition is happening the way we want, not the way the government have. The citizens' participation in that transition, it's crucial. It has to be there, and it will be. But in this phase, like first step is to build the movement and build these numbers that can become power, so we can have this demand achieved.
Thank you, Scarlett. Can I give the word to Sunny?
Yeah, so that's a very, very good question and a perfect observation to make. It is a point that gets raised at every intervention where we talk about debt for climate. So what are we going to do? What stops the government from, one, having the debt cancelled and then the very, very next day agreeing to new loans. 2, misappropriating the funds of the cancellation and perpetuating more corruption. So we have, Scarlett is right, our job is to build the momentum of the movement, but in the background, the researchers, the thinking, the innovation, we are beginning to think about the mechanism that we will use for the cancellation. And central to that mechanism is what we refer to in South Africa as a part of our constitution. We say in our constitution that we are a participatory democracy. So in that way, we encourage citizens of the country that is going through the cancellation process for citizens to organize themselves. So one of the ideas that we think about in South Africa is then to create a citizens assembly, as XR would call it, or a citizen movement that is eminent persons, eminent economists, credible individuals from academia and in the intellectual issues and the political parties. And we work from the central point that we don't trust politicians and we don't trust governments, but we do trust the leading lights of our society. In South Africa, we had people like Mandela and Tutu, and there are other people who fill the gap now. So we bring them on board as almost like an advisory council or a class of citizens that act in the interest of society, and they become then advisors or at least as the eyeballs of the citizens. And we also say that it's part of even Debt for Climate can begin to think about how that mechanism will work. But central to that is the acknowledgement that we must be aware that it could return to business as usual the very next day if we don't keep our wits about ourselves. So that is why we encourage participation of individuals at all levels. And then obviously, in the Bolsonaro case, in our corrupt president's place, is to use then our vote wisely and to make sure that we expose their crimes and hold them accountable and keep their feet to the fire constantly. And this is what we constantly do. But it's foremost in our minds to think about it. And that's a brilliant question, because it even forces us now to think about it and to acknowledge it and have it on record that it was mentioned that we must, something that we have to look energetically at and realistically at, because it can be abused. And we must also guard against vested interests coming on board, pretending to be our saviors, but who have every intention just to perpetuate the loss. So we must be also mindful of this, and it's something we can learn. But because individual countries, the cancellation will have different flavors, then there isn't a template, but the principle will be relevant to all countries. Be aware that this process can be abused, because certainly we can't trust the politicians. Bolsonaro hasn't behaved. Modi won't behave. Trump obviously didn't. So yeah, we must be aware of it. And as activists, that's our job, to be the custodians and to be the eyes and the sentries that hold people to account.
Thank you very much, Scarlett and Sunny. And while we transition to the next part of this meeting today, I want again to thank you both, and also midway to thank again the interpreters who are making an amazing job. And while going to the next part, I also want to just stop a minute on something also Scarlett was mentioning, another of the proposals of Debt for Climate. What I always admire by this movement is that the proposals are concrete and to the point. And in particular, you also mentioned, Scarlett, about asking during the COP that Global South countries and indigenous communities are more listened, they get some space. And it amazes me how many concrete things we must do for changing the world, and how many points we can address and we want to address. So what I thank you. Now we will transition to the next part of this talk, and I will present the mobilization slides. So from SR Europe, so this kind of I will explain how now we are joining and helping each other with many groups in Europe, and also who have an influence in the world. And then we will divide in breakout rooms for Germany and for, I don't remember all in my mind, but all parts around the world. So we can then have some discussions also with people in your area if you are interested in knowing more about the movements. So I think I can share my screen. Oh, no, I can't. So someone needs to give me permission to share my screen. Okay, now I can.
You have permission now.
Yes, thank you very much, Fran. So, we are Scientists Rebellion. So we presented that for climate. I want to give you now a couple of words about Scientists Rebellion, what we are up to and why we are acting. Probably you know already as if you joined this meeting, but let me say that Scientists Rebellion is a group of scientists doing civil disobedience and trying to do what's necessary for fulfilling our social role. We believe that we are scientists put in a society to not just publish papers about what's going wrong in the world, but to have a concrete impact, to go in the street and to do something. And this is we know it's getting serious with the climate crisis. These are the famous climate stripes, and we can, if I could, I would like to show you all the different conferences, Paris, Kyoto, where while we were talking about doing something for the climate, nothing was changing, and the stripes went red and more red. We know it's serious. These are photos from what's happening around the world. These were even before Pakistan, and that's what something terrible. There's something terrible happened just a few days ago. You know it's going to get worse. And here it is, the slide I was referring to. So the World Climate Conferences, the UN Climate Conferences, the IPCC reports, Copenhagen, Paris, Kyoto, we were talking all the time, and yet nothing was changing. So we need to do something for sure. In the latest IPCC report, most of the hope for the future relies on technologies that we still do not have on hand. Of course, societal change, but even that on a massive scale cannot possibly save us from going beyond 1.5 if we don't apply carbon subtracting technology that still are not existing. So that's the situation. Sweden is doing the most for its climate as a country for the climate work, and yet it's doing half of what would be needed for going below 1.5 by the end of the century. So that's the situation we are in. These technologies will arrive for decades, and nothing seems to be working actually. Polluting companies, industries are still holding influence in polity, in policies, and people. Something's happening. Can we mute? Yeah, sorry. So people living in wealthy countries are aware, but of course they are not acting in numbers. They are not they are not affected enough, and to understand how bad the situation is going. In other parts of the world, indigenous communities, most affected countries are fighting because they are living now the climate crisis, and it's not something about the future. If you interview the people around Europe, many people are aware that the climate crisis is real now and it's not a problem of the future, but still awareness isn't as strong as being there. What can we do in this situation? Well, as Scientists Rebellion, we want to do what we want to honor the growing trust that public has in science by leveling with the people, by telling the truth, by telling what's necessary to know to act. And we want to share publicly what we tell each other in conferences. Peter Kalmus always say, one time he went to a climate conference and he asked the people in the room how many people believe that still we can go beyond 1.5 by the end of the century. And the answer it's very similar to what I'm about to show in a few slides. Actually, most of the people know there is no possible way now for staying below 1.5, both because of carbon subtraction technologies that are still to come, and also, as I said, because we need to do much more than we are doing. We need to do this anyway, but we need to know that we are at risk. We are coming now out of the time. If we wanted to stay below 1.5, global emissions must peak before 2025 and then fall down a lot by 2030. So when they ask me what we should do now to stay below 1.5, I always say, what should we have done? Now we need to talk, we need to be aware that the risk is very strong that we are not going to stay below 1.5, and we must start asking, okay, what must we do for fighting for every fraction of degree? It's not just a number. 1.5 is a threshold that was decided that was mentioned in the different IPCC reports and then decided during the Paris Agreement because it's a dangerous thresholds after which some feedback effects and some tipping points are reached. So it's not just a number that I'm quoting, it's something really that needs to be straight in our, oh, I apologize, needs to be straight, very strong in our hearts. We are not saying that 1.5 is lost. We are still saying that, yeah, we can do it, but this is then what we say, that this is what I was mentioning. So no one raised their hand about 1.5 is still alive, and this is not, and this is the poll, the survey I was mentioning. It was asked to IPCC scientists about 1.5 threshold, and just 4% of the people answered. 40% of the people gave an answer to this poll. Usually when you send an online poll around, not that many, around 10% of the people care about the survey. A lot of people, it's very above average, answer to the poll, and most of them are convinced that we are not going to make it. There are voices, brave people that are joining our coalition, the different movements that for climate, Scientists Rebellion, Last Generation, and Fossil Fuels, Parents for Future, a lot of movements, and there are brave people telling that we are not going to make it under 1.5, but still they are ignored. Why? And why there are some leading climate scientists saying publicly the opposite? Because there is this idea that this stubborn optimism can save the day. That if we start to say we failed 1.5, then we are actually saying, yeah, we cannot do anything else. Why don't we just ignore the problem and keep on polluting, and who cares? But that's not what we are saying. And that's not what we are saying. I really love this quote by Dr. Stella Nyambura Mbau, saying that we mustn't say so, because this stubborn optimism is something that can be good only for elite in the global north. People are already experiencing how bad is 1.2. So if we are heading to a disaster, we must know, and we must know that we must take action now. We must tell this to the people. We must do everything that is in our power to tell the people what are the scientific data. I mean, what is the role of scientists if not to tell and to explain the truth to the people without relying on some hypothetical optimism that can help us deal with the crisis better? No, our role is to say how bad the situation can be and how can we face the situation. We have plans. There are concrete, all of the members of the coalitions I'm presenting have concrete ideas, from cancelling the debt to taking away permissions from governments and polluting industries, and to act to start a rapid decarbonization. That's what we are asking, that's what we need. As academics, we want to go into a honest dialogue with the people and with society. And as a united academia, we can. This is our power. If we start going in the street and going in conferences and saying, but this is our science, this is our role as scientists in the world. This is the role of academia. What's the other point? As members of society, then we have power and we can actually raise our voices. We are Scientist Rebellion. We are not the only, but one of the many answers to stop scientists and activists, I also want to say, to be ignored. We are scientists who take the nonviolent direct action and do civil disobedience to gain credibility, not to lose. I think that activists that only in this small bubble of academia, people can believe that if you act according to your studies, you can lose credibility. No, you can gain credibility if you act according to your science. If your house is on fire, this is something that we used to say a lot, but now it's so obvious. But if your house is on fire, and you cannot just say, oh, it's on fire, I'm going to sit here. Nobody will believe you. You must act, you would act as this is on fire. And that's what makes scientists gain credibility. Nonviolent direct action is a powerful tool for showing how important some questions are. And with small numbers of activists, of scientists, we can get a very big change. That's what we believe strongly. We want to empower the public and scientists and to level with the public to actually start responding to climate change. We decided to take action in Europe and in the global north for a number of reasons. Today, I want to stress once again what Sunny and what Scarlett were saying. As global north, and especially as a big country like Germany, we are responsible of much of the nowadays of the pollution of the carbon emissions, but also of the historical carbon emissions. So this is why we must act in global north. We must face the situation even, or not just even, because we don't face the consequences. We must deal for that. We must struggle against what we have done. So we will join. We decided to join forces to act on many different levels. We want to act as scientists with Scientist Rebellion. We want to act as young people, so with less generation. We want to act alongside Global South, and not just keeping in mind, but having a group led by Global South in this coalition. And now many more movements are joining in the coalition. We want to act all together to ask for a change. Why in coalition? Well, because we have many substantial demands and we want to put them together. We're all thinking about what's necessary to do and we want to gain small wins. If you think about civil disobedience history, for example, Gandhi, he didn't do the salt strike because the salt was important. He did it because small steps and small victories can combine and lead to a bigger victory. That's what we believe, and that's why we are focusing on demands, concrete actions, to act together to ask that these are the important things. Last generation, as I said, are people who want immediate climate actions. They've been for years asking here in Germany about something that is incredibly simple and is just a speed limit on motorways. It's so polluting. It's so bad to not have a speed limit, and Germany isn't even considering it. It's considered even a cultural aspect of Germany not to have a speed limit. Bad for Climate is the wonderful campaign that was presented also today, and it's a Global South-driven initiative. And that's also something that we are really proud to share the stage with. And concretely, we are planning actions in Bavaria and in Berlin. You might wonder why Bavaria and Berlin? Well, Berlin, of course, because it's the capital and many decisions are made here. And Bavaria, because it's the core of emissions, of richness, of power in Germany. So we want to act at the core of economic Bavaria and political Berlin power. also repression in Bavaria has been pretty strong, and we want to show that we are winning all together to face also heavy repression, because of how important our beliefs are. We have some demands structured in a narrative and in specific demands. So the first demand, as you may have understood from scientists, we want all scientists, all institutes and politicians to admit that the first global climate goal is lost, that we will go beyond some tipping points and that we need desperately to change the road. Once we acknowledge this, we can ask how we change road. But well, changing road means to take direct and strong actions. For example, canceling the debt owned by Global South. You may wonder, but how are you doing to ask this just to one nation? Well, the finance ministry of Germany already said that this is a good idea to actually cancel the debt. And so we are going to ask him to fulfill his promise and to write a letter to the International Monetary Fund to ask for Global South debt cancellation. Also, we are asking a decarbonization of the transport sector, public transport, affordable public transport, and limits on the speed limits. As Scarlett was saying, public transport is essential also to fight this kind of corruption, and to whenever we are starting to take away subsidies from fossil fuels and so also to petrol and gas, we must also take in consideration that we need social measures to deal with that, and we are bringing these to the table. So these are our concrete demands, our first victories that we aim to make a change. We can help make debt cancellation happen. Germany has a very huge power, voting power in the IMF, and we even had a debt cancellations after World War II. Germany had debt cancellation, and that was the key of a miraculous economic development. We can repeat this and we can create a miraculous, sustainable green transition. That was true green transition. And the popular support in Germany to decarbonize transport is strong. There are already many protests and many groups asking for a speed limit and asking, of course, to make public transport affordable, because prices are rising, because we don't want to keep on using gas, but we need alternatives. And that's what we are asking for. You can all make it happen. You can join communities around you who feel like you, who feel the need to act. I am a theoretical physics by education and also by job. And so I like to be in a community of people who also feel that, yes, science is exciting, science is interesting, but also science is a key part of our society. It is an instrument for society to deal with problems in a correct and just way. So I had a personal experience feeling in a community who is concerned about climate and social change. We want to create a don't look up moment for academia to show that we really, really need to do something. We will do non-violently, of course, but whatever it takes. Some people will be arrested, some people will spend some time in jail, some people will stay in custody, everyone will probably receive fines. We are aware of this. But still, it's too important to care about this. And as Sunny was saying, in Global North, we have the privilege to do so. We must think that we're not unlucky when we get fines. We have the privilege to act and just get a fine and not get arrested for I don't know how many years. Someone in the chat was mentioning, how can we act in countries like Peru where we risk death and violence if we do just some small claims, some small demonstrations? And we have the privilege in Europe we can do so, and so we must do so. We will organize actions not just in Germany, but also in their own countries. We are collaborating with other groups. So for sure, we'll participate anti-colonial months. We will participate the narrative about Thomas Sankara and about the necessity of dealing with social and crisis and climate crisis in the Global South. And whatever you can do, you can join us. You can join any of the groups in the coalition. You can inform. There is place for everyone. You don't need to be arrested after the first action. You can support, you can do talks, you can speak to your friends, you can speak to your colleagues. You can just come and listen to the meetings and learn more. Today it was a huge and wonderful discussion we had. I think it was very, very enriching, at least for me, and I learned more about these movements and the claims, and that's what you can do. Not to come to one of these fake assessment report where after other 20 years we will still be there saying, yeah, maybe we should just go back in time to solve the climate crisis. You can reach us, you can reach any of the other groups of the coalition, Last Generation, Death for Climate, on social networks, on Twitter. We have websites. Sunny pasted the website of Death for Climate in the chat. And I really, really thank you all for participating in this chat. And I am very open to questions for 5 minutes, and then we will open our breakout rooms. Thank you. Okay. I see a question in the chat. That's very cool. I will read it and then shortly, or maybe Iris, do you want to ask your question or shall I read it? Okay, I will read it. No problem. So let me just fix on this. What do you think of the existing technology that there exists? I'm not too aware of any of but there is a rising movement called Operation Arctic in Finland that stands for technology reparations of the climate and icebergs melting. I mean, does technology play any role in minimizing the effect of the 1.5 degree and more? Personally, I have some interest in energy grids, for example, but anyway, yes, technology always can help. But we also must be aware, and we must really pay attention to stay a bit far from this narrative that technology will save the situation. In the IPCC report, we are even a little bit too close to the narrative. We are saying that below 1.5 degree, to stay below this goal, we will need some of these upcoming carbon capturing technologies. They are somehow, if you read the papers, some of it is actually coming, but not on a global scale. And so it's always very, very dangerous to rely on some technologies that are not completely safe. Still, of course, they will play a role. But for example, whenever I talk about the energy sector in Germany, I always say, yes, the technology of renewable energies will take a role. But we should not just think about produce more green energy. We must start thinking about consuming less energy. So that's the key part. Yes, they will play a role, just a role. So let's also think about what are the other sectors that will play a role and how can we empower these sectors. If you look in the climate tracker, what are the foreseeable policies that must be taken care of for the future? Just renewable energy is just one of them. But then we have a transition to a kind of green finance. Of course, global tracker cannot talk about the end of capitalism, but more or less that's the idea. We must start caring about most affected communities in Global South and also in Global North to pay attention to access to energy. I'm talking about the energy sector because that's what I know more. But for example, access to energy, affordable, that's also what we need to take care of. So my short answer is yes, they will play a role, but we can also play our role, and that's important. Thank you for this super nice question.